continue. What we want to learn today is about the hormonal control. It means about the endocrine organs. I have avoided writing endocrine system, but if you want to call it as endocrine system, that is also quite possible. Here, I must invite your attention to this statement. Complex life of animals is controlled by two regulatory systems: electrical signals through the neurons, which makes a nervous system, and chemical signals through hormones, which makes the endocrine system. Life is very complex. Imagine every animal. Take the example of humans, of course. I am trying to tell you, you are trying to listen. I am moving here. I am trying to show some expression on my face. At the same time, my heart is beating. At the same time, my kidneys are forming urine. At the same time, my bone marrow is producing blood cells. At the same time, I am breathing. At the same time, the food I had is being digested. Imagine. Do you expect that all these things will happen easily, without any control, without any plan to regulate? Of course not. Everything is controlled. Life is controlled. Even a paramecium or an amoeba or a simple bacterium, life is controlled. And for complex life like ours, or the complex life of an insect, or a complex life of a plant, everything is controlled. Plant story is slightly different. We are going to talk about the plants a little later. But when we are considering presently the animals, and when we are talking of the different systems, you can expect at least some of the systems of the animal body to be reserved for regulation. All these functions are to be controlled. My digestion has to be controlled, my muscle action has to be controlled, my thinking has to be controlled, my sight has to be controlled, my hearing has to be controlled, and at the same time, I must feel free. असं नाही की मी प्रत्येक गोष्टीत इंडिव्हिज्युअली इन्वॉल्व्ड आहे. थिंग्स आर ऑटोमॅटिकली हॅपनिंग, बट देन इट इज पॉसिबल बिकॉज वी हॅव टू रेग्युलेटरी सिस्टम्स इन द बॉडी. All animals will have two regulatory systems, and one is for regulating the different functions by sending electrical signals. I think you are all aware of the neurons. I'll just put up a neuron here, and then you can appreciate this. Yeah, so here is a neuron, and there can be a chain of neurons. See, then these are the neurons, and they transfer the signals. So electrical signal will be passing through the neuron. I think all of you are aware that yes, electrical signals pass through the neurons. Electrical signals are passing through the neurons. You know this very well. E stands for electrical signals. Basically, nervous system made up of neurons, brain, nerves from the brain, spinal cord, nerves from the spinal cord, and several other issues. They are all working on the basis of electrical signals which are being passed. All of us are aware that the nervous system, which consists of neurons, billions of neurons, they are the ones which provide a control on the body. Well, that is very much true. Equally true is about the chemical signals. I think you are all aware of the hormones: thyroxine, FSH, LH, LTH. I think you are all aware of the hormones, and these hormones are chemical signals. So these chemical signals are sent from the endocrine glands: pituitary, thyroid, adrenal. You are all generally aware, and we are going to go into some details. Those chemical signals are equally important. So a given function in the body is at a time covered by electrical signals coming from the nervous system and the chemical signals coming from the endocrine system. Let us take the example of muscle action. See, I'm making muscle action. I can shake my limbs this way, or I can walk primarily because signals are coming from primarily because signals are coming from brain. But at the same time, some adrenaline is being secreted from the adrenal gland. Do you know the kidneys? On the top of the kidneys, there are adrenal glands, and some adrenaline is being secreted. I'm talking to you just now. My lecture is being recorded. I'm a little conscious because I want to make sure that I'm not going to make a mistake. So, extra adrenaline is being secreted, and that adrenaline is also helping a better blood flow to my muscles. So, my muscles are being regulated from brain, no doubt, but at the same time, the adrenaline which is being added to my blood is helping overall better action. Okay, so it means at a time, my body just now, for example, is being controlled by electrical signals through the neurons and through the chemical signals. Like this, you can always think that these two systems are working together. Actually, A regulates B and B regulates A. What is A? Electrical signals through the system of neurons. And what is B? Chemical signals which are flowing through the blood, because you know hormones are carried by the blood. So the nervous system regulates endocrine system. A regulates B, and endocrine system regulates nervous system. So this is something very important. And then A and B together, this and this together, regulate the life of the animal. Interesting. Did you ever think that the nervous system and the endocrine system are for a joint cooperative function? You may have studied nervous system and the hormonal system, endocrine system in school books, good. But this you may or may not have thought of, that these two systems are made for regulating the entire body. A and B together regulate the life of an animal. This is not true for digestive system and respiratory system, and not for circulatory system. Those are not regulatory systems. Regulatory systems are two: the nervous system and the hormonal system. This is true for all animals. I mean, not only for humans, all vertebrates. Not only for vertebrates, but also for most of the invertebrates also, this is applicable. This can be compared to a situation where a country has, like country like India has Prime Minister and President, and the two together are regulating the country. So, Prime Minister helps President to take decisions, and President guides the Prime Minister to take decisions. So, President and Prime Minister together regulate the country. In a similar way, the nervous system through the electrical signals and the endocrine system through the chemical signals regulate all body functions. Which all body functions? Muscle action, I already told you. I told you the internal things that are happening, beating of the heart and process of digestion and urine formation, and also the process of the sensory perceptions and thinking and imagining, almost all these things. Wonderful. It's impossible. Without regulation, these things would have never happened. A very close look can be taken to this particular diagram. Here is a very, very clear-cut relationship being shown between the two regulatory systems. Here you can see the major part of the nervous system, the brain, and part of the brain is all well known to you to be hypothalamus. So this much is all the nervous system component. And I think all of you are aware that a very important gland, the endocrine gland, the pituitary gland, is attached to brain. Everybody knows that. It means that nervous system and the major gland of the endocrine system, that is pituitary gland, are all attached together. In fact, a part of the brain known as hypothalamus is also doing two jobs. It has got neurons and electrical signals are operating here, but at the same time, hypothalamus also produces hormones. So it seems that the brain with the hypothalamus nervous component. Hypothalamus along with pituitary, endocrine component. Hypothalamus common to both. It is a very, very clear hint that the two are together. It's not there against each other. Nervous system is not against endocrine system is not against the nervous system. Both are working together. This is a very important relation which is being seen here, that nervous and endocrine link is established, and you know further that hypothalamus will guide the pituitary and pituitary will guide several other tissues. Oh my God, these books are here. I have to remove them. I don't know why these have been kept here. Oh, this is, I'll just read this. This is Standard 10 Part 2. Oh my God, many of your state board book students. How lucky you are. You had a nice book that you read. You know, you had two volumes of science for Maharashtra State Board, and second volume is devoted totally to biology. I am a little bit happy about it, naturally. When it comes to such books, some of you who are from CBSE and all, maybe that because you have a lot of options, but maybe that you have used this kind of a book. Oh my God, this is quite rich. This is biology book is quite rich. We are referring that also. Some of you are from Central Board. Central Board, yes, CBSE, and probably you must have used this kind of a book. Okay, fine. Books are good. The only problem with this book is that they are mixing up chapters of physics and chemistry and biology without probably allowing you to know exactly what is what. Basic plan is good, but I think this book may or may not have given enough detail. So I have a very strong suggestion to CBSE students. Can I ask you to refer the State Board book? Because State Board book will be so good for you to get a good understanding of the biology, which probably from NCERT you can develop, but to a limited extent. Let us understand that there are lots of books for education, and I think this book has come up very well. I will strongly suggest the CBSE students that they should use this, so that whatever shortage they have suffered, that will be made good of. And all of you, whatever mode, if you can refer the CBSE, ICSE books, they are good, but they are quite heavy. Okay, so I meant to say, this is only, I will suggest it, and then I will not talk much about it. Basically, when you want to take up science and when you want to make a career based on biology, I think many of you want to make a career based on biology. In that case, it's my duty to tell you in what way you must go. But it depends on your interest and your time and availability. But I just suggested this to you. Okay. So coming back to the major point, see, hypothalamus controls pituitary. When you have studied these things in the school days, this point probably was properly studied by you. If not, no, that's the purpose. If you are not studied those things, then you must know that hypothalamus controls pituitary. How? I am going to explain. Pituitary controls other endocrine glands. Hormones of the hypothalamus control pituitary. Hormones of the pituitary control thyroid, adrenal, ovary, testes. And these are also kind of hormone producing organs. So these hormone producing organs are controlled by hormones of pituitary. Hormones of the pituitary are controlled by hormones of the hypothalamus. And hypothalamus is a junction. It's something which is common to nervous system and endocrine system. That's the point that I want to say, that there is a clear-cut nervous endocrine link. Hormones are chemical signals and they are produced in very, very small quantities. A little more about the different types of hormones and their chemical nature I will be talking. You are generally aware of the hormones of the animals and hormones of the plants also. Because when I say hormones, some of you must have started thinking about the plant hormones. Yes, there are plant hormones. Remember the plant hormones? Auxin, cytokinin, gibberellic acid, that is gibberellins, abscisic acid, ethylene. 5 groups of hormones. Once again, auxin, cytokinin, gibberellic acid, that is gibberellins, abscisic acid, ethylene. Yes, we are going to have a session about all these things in the plant physiology later on. So hormones seem to be the chemical messengers. They are required in very, very small quantities, and they will be produced by the endocrine tissues in the animals, and in the plants they will be produced from some meristematic tissues and all, but we will consider them little later on. So it seems that in the living world, chemical signaling and chemical control is common. This you can say is kind of a chemical communication. So once again, understand the nervous and the endocrine link, and we want to go into some more details. So here we have a small pause. So let's go into some more details of the endocrine system. You can say endocrine organs, that is endocrine glands. Overall, it is very necessary that we are aware of the different glands in the body. Basically, what is a gland? Gland is something which produces, which secretes something. And all these different glands in the body can be divided in three categories. Which are those three categories? Pure endocrine glands, pure exocrine glands, and mixed glands. Did you ever think of this? All the glands in the body. There are so many glands in the body. They are divisible into pure endocrine, pure exocrine, and mixed glands. What do you mean by pure exocrine? Pure exocrine means those which have a tube, a duct through which the secretion can be carried. Imagine liver. Do you remember the duct starting from the liver? Which is that duct? Bile duct, of course. Then salivary glands. You know there are three salivary glands here and three here, three pairs of salivary glands, and from each salivary gland there will be a duct, a tube. Duct means a tube which carries the saliva to the mouth cavity. Then think of the sweat glands. Where are the sweat glands present? In the skin. And millions of sweat glands are present in the skin, and from each sweat gland there is a tiny duct. So those glands which secrete certain things and the secretions are carried by the tubes or ducts, then they are called as exocrine glands. As against that, think what are endocrine glands. Endocrine glands are those which secrete material. For example, endocrine glands are hormone producing glands, and the hormones which they produce, that is carried directly by blood. So if hormone is carried by blood directly and it is not having any duct, so for example pituitary gland there is no duct, from thyroid gland there is no tube, and from adrenal gland there is no tube, no duct. But then how is that secretion taken to other places? It is taken to the different places via blood, because blood is a great transport medium. We already know the details of the blood. You know, it is in the plasma there is a lot of water, and most of these hormone molecules are tiny and water soluble, most of them. So naturally they will be easily carried by the blood, and so blood will carry it wherever they are required. So pure endocrine glands are those whose secretions are carried by blood and they don't have ducts. So these are two clear-cut categories. And what are the pure endocrine glands? Pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal. Pure endocrine, they produce nothing, they produce only hormones, and the hormones are carried by blood. Mixed glands is the third category. We are generally aware of mixed glands. I'll first tell you the examples: pancreas, testes, and ovary. Why should these be called as mixed glands? In what sense they are mixed? They are mixed because each one of them has got an exocrine part and an endocrine part. Let us take example of pancreas. Pancreas is a mixed gland because pancreas has production of pancreatic juice, and pancreatic juice is carried by pancreatic duct. When you draw diagrams, you know that there is a tube inside the pancreas through which the pancreatic juice will be carried, and the pancreatic juice will be added to the food. So naturally pancreatic juice which is produced is an exocrine secretion because it is carried by tube. But equally famous it is that pancreas has islets of Langerhans. I think everybody knows this. And islets of Langerhans produce two hormones. Which two hormones? Insulin and glucagon. And these two hormones, they are not carried by tube. These two hormones, where do they go? They go into the blood. So insulin and glucagon are produced by special endocrine tissue known as islets of Langerhans, and then that hormone material will be directly carried by blood to every cell in the body. So at a time, pancreas has exocrine part, that is pancreatic juice producing part, and endocrine part, that is the hormone producing part, and that's why it is called as a mixed gland. Testes. Now I'll ask you a question. What is the exocrine secretion of testes? Exocrine secretion? Yes, exocrine secretion means that which is carried by tube. Tell me. Yes, you have correctly thought. It is sperms. Sperms are carried by tubes. You know vast difference at all. Can you tell me which is the endocrine product of testes? Of course, I think all of you know it is hormone, and that hormone of the testes is known as testosterone. Come now, let us consider the ovary. Which is the exocrine product of the ovary? Exocrine product means the product that is carried by tube. Eggs, of course. Ovary will produce eggs and it will be carried by tube. Which tube? Can you guess? Oviduct. Correct. And ovary also produces hormones. Two hormones are very famous. Can you imagine? Yes. Ovary produces two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. So two hormones, estrogen and progesterone, are produced by the ovary. They are directly carried by blood, and the eggs which are produced by the ovary, they are carried by tube, oviduct. So from this point of view, pancreas, testes and ovary are mixed glands. So this is a classification of the glands. This classification must be understood because when we want to understand the endocrine glands, we must know in what relation these are with reference to exocrine and the mixed gland. So what we are not going to study about the exocrine glands because that is not the topic. We are going to study now endocrine glands, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, some details, not very much, some details, and yeah, we will be also talking about the pancreas, testes and ovary because they also produce some hormones. So that should be our next goal with a small pause. So looking at this picture, you must be remembering some of your pages of the school books. Maybe some of you have learned it in 9th, some of you have learned it in 10th. All these are mainly the endocrine glands in the body. Hypothalamus I have not shown, but then I think pituitary is the main thing. You know, in your books mention that pituitary is the master gland. What do you mean by master? Many times it is said pituitary is the master of the endocrine orchestra. Oh my God! It means all these are playing music. The thyroid and the adrenal and the ovary and the testes, they are playing music, and this is the master of the endocrine orchestra. So it is under the influence of the pituitary that all other glands will be working. Not all other glands. This is not a gland. This is not a gland. I mean, this is a gland, but it is an exocrine gland. I am talking mainly about the thyroid, the adrenal, which are being controlled by the pituitary, and also the mixed gland ovary and the mixed gland testes. These two are pure endocrine. These two are mixed, and this is also pure endocrine. So pure endocrine are pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, and mixed are ovary and testes. Pancreas I have not shown here. Pancreas can be shown, but you can imagine it is in the loop of the duodenum. That's a mixed gland. Purpose of this sketch is to allow us to know the sources of hormones. Sources of hormones, yes. Basic source, it is hypothalamus that we have told to you already. Then hypothalamus sends chemical signals to pituitary, and pituitary will send chemical signals to thyroid. From pituitary, a chemical signal begins, and the name of that chemical signal is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So pituitary produces a chemical messenger. It is called as a chemical messenger, which will go to the thyroid gland cells, and when this TSH message is received by the thyroid gland, then the thyroid gland will produce thyroxine. Everybody knows which is the hormone of the thyroid gland? Thyroxine. And there is one more, if you want to remember, calcitonin. So thyroxine and calcitonin are the two hormones produced by the thyroid gland. But thyroid gland will produce these hormones only if the thyroid gland gets an order or a chemical signal from the pituitary. So what is TSH? TSH is a hormone produced by the pituitary, which will stimulate the cells of the thyroid to produce thyroxine and to produce calcitonin. If pituitary does not send the signals TSH, now I am talking something serious. If the pituitary does not produce the signal TSH and that signal doesn't come to thyroid, then thyroid will not produce thyroxine. Oh my God! If thyroxine is not produced, there will be issues, there will be problems of growth and many other things. So it seems that thyroid is important, but the thyroid function will be controlled by pituitary. Again, thyroid will also produce another hormone, ACTH. ACTH, adenocorticotropic hormone. And this adenocorticotropic hormone produced by the pituitary, not thyroid, produced by the pituitary, will act on adrenal gland. This is stigma, this is kidney. You know, kidney is not an endocrine gland. What is there on the top of the kidney is adrenal gland. So the pituitary gland will produce ACTH, adenocorticotropic hormone. Is it necessary to remember these long forms? I don't think. You may or you may not. You may say that some chemical signal is coming, you may call it as ACTH, or simply say some chemical signal on the pituitary to control the adrenal. You know, some of us have very good memory. Some of us have weak memory. The weak or the strong memory does not matter much. Let me tell you very frankly. What matters is our ability to imagine. What science needs is the ability to imagine, not ability to just memorize and remember. That doesn't work in science. You may say that there is a chemical signal ACTH and that works on the adrenal gland, and this adrenal gland will have two very important hormones, cortisol and aldosterone. Actually, we are going to learn a little more about the adrenal gland. It has got two areas, cortex and medulla. See, for the excretory system we have learned, for kidney also there is an outer region known as cortex and inner region which is called as medulla. So even this one will have cortex and medulla. But when I am talking of these two hormones, cortisol and aldosterone, they are produced from the cortex. Cortex is the outer zone of the adrenal gland. Medullary hormones are different. This particular agent, ACTH, a chemical agent which is sent by the pituitary, this does not control medulla. It controls only cortex, and that's why it is called as adenocorticohormones. Okay, I think there are too many details. All details may not be required for you. तुम्ही सध्या एवढं लक्षात ठेवा. TSH governs thyroid, ACTH from pituitary governs adrenal gland. Now comes a set FSH, LH, LTH. Follicle stimulating hormone. Very interesting, very important. Follicle stimulating hormone is produced in the males. It will regulate the functioning of testes, and the FSH in the females will regulate the functioning of the ovary. Very important hormone, FSH. It is the FSH makes possible the monthly changes in the females, the menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle requires several hormones. One important hormone will be FSH. In men, elderly boys and men, testes produce sperms. The sperm production by the testes will be controlled by FSH. Of course, testosterone will also be required, but testosterone will be secreted by the testes itself. There is a complex relationship. But the agent from the pituitary known as FSH it regulates the working of the ovary and it regulates the working of the testes. Similarly, there is a hormone known as LH. LH is also required for the functioning of the ovary. Maybe that I'll go into some details later on if required. I'll just tell you that FSH and LH together, regulate the working of the ovary, because if the egg has to come out of the ovary, first for about 10 days FSH must be strongly active, and then on 14th day the LH must be active. I have gone through your books and some of your books are given those details in a very beautiful manner. आता ते तुम्हाला ते कळलं असेल की नाही माहित नाही, पण मला वाटतं स्टेट बोर्ड बोध आहे, ICSEच्या पुस्तकात आहे आणि थोड्याफार त्रोटक स्वरूपामध्ये इव्हन याच्यामध्ये पण आहे, पण ते पुरेसं दिलं नाही यांनी. म्हणून मी तुम्हाला मगापासून सांगतोय की ज्यांनी CBSEची पुस्तकं वापरली आहेत त्यांचं बायोलॉजी नीट होण्यासाठी त्यांनी स्टेट बोर्डचं हे जे पुस्तक आहे पार्ट 2 बायोलॉजीसाठी हे वापरा, आणि नाही तर मग ICSEची पुस्तकं पण तुम्ही वापरू शकता. नाराज होऊ नका, सेंट्रल बोर्ड खूप छान आहे, NCERT पण चांगलं आहे, पण काय सांगू का काही वेळा मटेरियलची कमतरता असू शकते आणि तुम्हाला आता वेळ पण आहे आणि गरज पण आहे, तर तुम्ही थोडं केलं पाहिजे. सो येस, FSH and LH टुगेदर कंट्रोल ओव्हरी अँड टेस्टीज. टेस्टीजला LHचा दुसरं नाव आहे ICSH. आता पुष्कळ डिटेल्स कुठे कुठे आपण बघत बसणार. ठीक आहे. LTH, लॅक्टोट्रॉफिक हार्मोन. दिस इज वर्किंग ऑन मॅमरी ग्लँड. And naturally it is working in females to produce milk, to firstly to prepare the mammary glands for milk production during pregnancy. So LTH is working on in the females, and there is no particular role in the males. Then these are all from this part of the pituitary. Let us call it as anterior lobe. Pituitary can be said to be in two parts: a bigger anterior lobe and a smaller posterior lobe. From anterior lobe there is TSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, LTH. This is all from anterior lobe. There is one more hormone from the anterior lobe, growth hormone. You are all aware of the growth hormone, and growth hormone is acting on the human body. So you know these hormones, TSH, ACTH, FSH, etc., these are regulating the other endocrine glands, whereas GH is directly regulating the entire body. Growth hormone will work on muscles, of course it will work on bones and other connective tissues, overall growth. And because now at this particular age 15, 16, you have grown much more than what you were at the age of 10, obviously in your case growth hormone has played a great role, and the growth hormone will be there throughout life, but the next 10 years the growth hormone is again going to work nicely for you, because I think up to the age of 25 tissues keep on growing much and much. So growth hormone, GH, TSH working on thyroid, ACTH working on adrenal, particularly adrenal cortex, FSH, LH working on reproductive organs, ovary, testes, and LTH working on mammary glands. All these are the hormones coming from, yes, anterior pituitary. Pituitary has two parts. Then there are certain aspects of the posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary releases two hormones. One is oxytocin and another is ADH. I think in your school books, in some of the books, there is mention of ADH. If you want, you can remember the long form. What is the long form of ADH? Anti-diuretic hormone. फार होतं, एवढा आम्हाला नको आहे. फॉर्म्युलेशनची वेळ आहे. इंटरेस्ट असेल तसं लक्षात ठेवा, थोडं लिहून बघा, हळूहळू लक्षात राहील. लगेच नीटची तयारी, आता नीटसाठी मी तयारी करणार आणि मला डॉक्टर व्हायचंय असलं काही सध्या बोलू नका. तुम्ही फक्त अभ्यास करा, फक्त एन्जॉय करा. मेमरीला खूप ताण देऊ नका, पण अगदीच रिकामपणे घालवू नका. थोडंसं तुम्ही लक्षात ठेवलं तर चांगलंच आहे. अँटी डायुरेटिक हार्मोन, and this ADH acts on kidneys. Why? Because kidneys are organs which produce urine, and This hormone, probably you have heard that antidiuretic hormone allows limited quantity of urine formation, because if too much of urine is produced, what will happen? A lot of water from the body will be lost. It must be prevented. So how much of urine you should produce? Maybe 1 liter, 2 liter, at the most 3 liters, it's fine. But sometimes there are some people who have shortage of ADH, and if their pituitary does not produce enough ADH, then their urine becomes 10 liters, 15 liters also, my God. But that can be corrected. Medicines are available. But then ADH is originally a hormone that will help to maintain the water balance in the body. There are other issues also. There are other functions of the ADH. Oxytocin. Oxytocin, which is also released from the posterior lobe of the pituitary, it will have action on uterus as well as mammary glands. Fantastic hormone. Oxytocin is usually produced at the end of the pregnancy. You know, at the end of the pregnancy, there should be a natural way by which the muscles of the uterus will start contracting. And when the muscles of the uterus contract, the baby will be delivered out. And for this to happen, oxytocin works. Usually the oxytocin is produced more in quantity at the end of pregnancy. In the case of humans, at the end of the 9 months of pregnancy. And then the oxytocin will work on the muscles of the uterus, and the uterus will start contracting. The oxytocin will start. Good thing. It means that oxytocin has started working and the baby will be expelled out. Oxytocin at the same time acts on mammary glands. Because when the baby is to be born, it is exactly that time that milk must be available. So mammary glands will be releasing the milk when oxytocin is available. But तुम्ही म्हणाल की oxytocin आणि LTH दोघांचं काय काम आहे mammary gland? See, LTH will try to make the mammary glands enlarged, will make the milk secreting units better developed, and oxytocin will help to release. The oxytocin will try to release the milk from the mammary gland. There are so many details, you know, all that detailed physiology we may not be required to learn now, but yes, this is a nice trailer of the endocrine system that you are going to learn. त्यातल्या काही काही गोष्टी तुमच्या लक्षात येत आहेत, काही काही तुम्हाला माहिती आहे, तुम्ही शिकलेला आहात. तर हे जे सगळं आहे याच्यातनं एक आपल्या लक्षात येतं की दिस इज a kind of a diagram to show the sources of various hormones. कोणकोणचे हार्मोन्स तुम्हाला माहिती आहे? Growth hormone, TSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, LPH, oxytocin, ADH, thyroxine, calcitonin, cortisone, aldosterone, estrogen, progesterone, which are being produced from ovary, testosterone, which is being produced from the testes. And then I have adrenaline, which is also produced from the adrenal gland, but that is produced from the medulla and so on. So I think this is one more detailing of the endocrine system. Most of these things at least partially you have already learnt in the school books, and you are going to study these things in some more details later on, and we take a small pause here. So we have just now taken into account the different sources of hormones in the human body. Hypothalamus we did not consider seriously because I think there are too many details about hypothalamus, but let me tell you, chemical signals start from hypothalamus and then only pituitary can work, and then from pituitary several hormones are produced, which we have just now learned, and then the pituitary will control the other endocrine tissues. Now we will be able to see on the screen some of these things in some more details, particularly about the details of the pituitary gland. Let's begin. Before that, first two pictures will be about the general endocrine organs in the body. I think the PDF sheets for those will also be sent to you. So here we begin with the generalized picture of the endocrine glands in the body. You are aware, here is the brain and here is the pituitary gland which is attached to the brain from the lower side. Then there is a thyroid gland. Everybody knows the thyroid gland is present here and it is just below the larynx. Then you have the adrenal gland. Now in the top of the kidney you expect to have the adrenal gland. These are the two adrenal glands which are not clearly seen here. I can show you a better picture later on. Then you already know that there is pancreas. And pancreas is something which is a mixed endocrine gland. We have already talked about it. And then in the males there are testes, and in the females there are ovaries. So these are the major endocrine tissues. There is one more, thymus gland. This thymus gland is also endocrine in function, but it has got some other functions also. Some of you have heard that thymus gland is here just behind the breastbone. This breastbone is known as the sternum. Behind the sternum there is a thymus gland, and thymus gland is involved in immunity function. It is one that provides defense mechanism to us, but it also produces a hormone. Let me mention the hormone of the thymus, thymosin. But the thymosin has again function related to immune system. It is not considered as an endocrine gland in general as when we are considering other endocrine glands, but it is very specific, and we may not talk about the thymus gland much more than this. So we will have one more picture, and probably that can tell you some additional ideas. This will all being sent to you again in the PDF format. Now here is one more picture, and you can see here hypothalamus regulating the pituitary. There are too many levels. Whenever we are giving these diagrams, we are not expecting you to remember everything. No, not at all. For example, pituitary gland has lots of parts. This part known as infundibulum. Don't worry about it. But there is an anterior part and posterior. Anterior means this side, and posterior means this side. There is also mention here of the pineal gland. Just like I told you about thymus, there is a pineal or pineal gland, and pineal is also gland located here. If pituitary is here, pineal is here. Pituitary is on the downside of the brain, pineal is on the upside of the brain. Very minute. Pituitary is so small, it weighs only 1 gram. 1 gram or 1.5 gram, that's all. What is this? That's the size of the pituitary, and still it is able to control the entire body. So small size doesn't matter. So it is not the size that matters, it is the ability that matters. Pituitary is at least 1 to 1.5 grams. Pineal is milligrams. It's a very tiny gland. And I think the pineal gland is probably heard by you that it is related to something about sleeping and being conscious, to wake up you need a pineal gland, because it is very indirectly sensitive to light. So it produces melatonin hormone. I don't think we will go into those details. So pineal gland has lots of other functions. Pineal gland controls rhythm, circadian rhythm. 24-hour biological clock is controlled by the pineal gland. Lots of issues are there. The biology I love biology simply because it provides to me lots of information about the way I am living, about the way the living world is working. But there are too many details. But then, sometimes we have to compromise. Thymus gland, pineal gland, we may not go into those details. Pituitary is something which probably is better known to us. And then there is the thyroid, and behind the thyroid there are parathyroid. I did not talk about parathyroid till now, because you may be expecting me to say that. I know I had to mention that, and I choose a proper time to talk about it. Parathyroid, behind the thyroid there is parathyroid. I will talk about it a little later on. Adrenal gland, and I told you cortex and medulla. Surrounding is the cortex and middle is the medulla. This is a transverse section. On the kidney, the adrenal is present. I think you'll have a better picture later on. And of course, these are the ovaries in the case of the female, and testes in the case of the male, and this is the pancreas, which is present in the loop of the duodenum. Duodenum forms a kind of a loop, a curved portion, and some space is generated. There the pancreas lies, and it's a mixed gland. Ovary, testes, pancreas are mixed gland. What do you mean by mixed gland? Try to remember. I had told you. And the adrenal, thyroid, and the pituitary are pure endocrine glands. Pineal also a pure endocrine gland. About thymus, you don't classify it, but thymus also has got some special cells known as T cells produced, lymphocytes. When we considered circulation, that time this was mentioned, lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are of two types, B and T lymphocytes. So those are produced here. So we will not try to classify thymus gland. So this is a generalized picture which you can learn. I think we'll now go into some interesting details about the pituitary gland. Here is some interesting picture of the pituitary gland. Look at this small, very tiny. The brain is quite big as compared to that pituitary is very, very small, and it has got nice blood supply. You want to see the blood supply of pituitary? I can show you a picture in which you can see the blood supply of the pituitary. Oh my God, unimaginable. A very tiny gland of about 1 gram or so, it has got beautiful blood supply. Why the endocrine glands have very nice blood supply? Imagine, because the products of the endocrine glands are to be carried by blood, so they have nice blood supply. All details have been studied. Remember, whatever we are learning about human body is also true for fish body and frog body and a lizard body and a bird body. All vertebrates have endocrine glands of all similar design and similar function. In fact, pituitary is studied in the human case late. Pituitary was first studied in the case of the fish and the frog and other mammals. Very late. We know about human pituitary very well, thanks to research which has already occurred and which is still occurring in other animals. There is a lot of homology. Just like you have homology in the heart structures, you have homology in the kidney structures, you have homology in the endocrine glands. All vertebrates are having endocrine glands which are homologous. What do you mean by that? That the basic structure of a pituitary to have the anterior and posterior part. So this is the anterior part and this is the posterior part. This is there in all vertebrates. Be sure. Now, this is a very delicate gland and it must have special protection. So this gland is situated in a bone. This is a bone. We are going to learn something about the skeleton later on. Let me tell you the name of the bone. If you want to listen to it and want to remember it, that's fine. The name of this bone is, want to remember? Want to listen? At least listen. Sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone. And in the sphenoid bone, the pituitary is present. Brain is all here. And there is a special socket which is made in the bone, and that is called as something. I want to avoid those terms. Sella turcica. Well, don't worry. If you don't want to remember, doesn't matter. I'll repeat. It's a small gland, a delicate and important gland. It is protected in a bone. The bone is known as sphenoid, and there is a cavity in the bone known as sella turcica. आता एवढं लक्षात नाही ठेवायचं तर नका ठेवू. एवढंच म्हणा की the brain is resting on the floor, and the floor of that brain box is known as it's a sphenoid bone, and in that there is a cavity. You want to see that? Okay, I can show you. Very interesting. Be careful. I want you to be having good daring now. So you want me to show this? Okay, I think I'll put up the lights and then show you. Just a minute. Okay, here we go. And I'm just going to show you something very interesting, and you are not going to miss this opportunity to look at what I'm trying to show. Here it is, the human skull. Yes, we have this human skeleton. We have got it from one of our very senior friends, who is an orthopedic surgeon now. One of our senior friends who was my student long back, and he has given us this entire set of bones for studies. And so this is the human skull. So can you see the human skull now? Okay, this is better. Is it okay? Okay. Now I will just try to open the brain box. I will cut the brain box. I have a scissor here and just trying to use the scissor to cut this. I'll cut it. And when I cut it, I can open it. Oh my God, it's open. And here it is. This is the base. The brain is all here. You want me to show it this way? No. Okay. Then I can show you that there is a cavity here. Can you see this cavity? Can you see this cavity here? So this is the cavity which is being called as sella turcica. Is it being seen clearly? And it is in this cavity that the pituitary gland is located. Yes, human skeleton is something that you want to study later on. That time once again you will be able to see the skull. So that's the peculiarity of the pituitary gland. It is nicely supplied by blood, and it controls several other tissues, several other glands. And I think now we can go for some extra information about the pituitary. I can say, why only about pituitary? I can say about most of the endocrine glands that these hormones which are produced should be in normal level, normal percentage, normal quantity. Sometimes glands may produce extra hormones, or a particular gland may produce less hormones. There are two words which you will read in the PDF sheets which are being provided to you: hypersecretion and hyposecretion. What do you mean by hypersecretion? Hypersecretion is extra hormones produced more than necessary, and hyposecretion will mean what? Hormones produced are less than necessary. So if there is extra secretion, hypersecretion, there can be some problems in the body. Similarly, if there is less secretion, hyposecretion, even then there can be some problems in the body. So yeah, there are some of those things which are famous, and I think I can show you some of the pictures about it. Let us think of the very famous hypersecretion, and I'll show you a picture about the hypersecretion of the pituitary, particularly extra amount of growth hormone produced. And you know, there is what is called as pituitary giant. You know, there are people who may be 6.5, 7 feet tall, but little abnormal in their body shapes. I mean, say they are otherwise okay, but you know, they have grown too tall. And at the same time, there have been some people who are very dwarf. They have not produced enough, they probably don't produce enough of the growth hormone. So one side extra, that is hypersecretion, that's called as pituitary giant. And the other side, there is less secretion, it's called as pituitary dwarf. Have a look at this. Very interesting. This is pituitary giant and this is pituitary dwarf. And on the background there is a circus tent. Yeah, you know, many of the pituitary dwarfs, they entertain people in a, they used to, of course. Nowadays such possibilities are less because there are hardly any circus activities going on in the world. See, pituitary giant and pituitary dwarf, both are abnormal. Or you can think of this, a pituitary giant and a pituitary dwarf. How is their life? Oh, well, okay. I mean, many of them are, I mean, intelligence wise and otherwise they are quite okay, but you know, they definitely have some issues in their regular life because of their height, and some hormonal imbalances there. Because of that, they may, of course, suffer. I can show you one more thing. This happens, you know, this kind of pituitary giantism can happen in different forms, and there is a comparison. You can imagine if this is these are the persons with normal height. This is a person which is much taller, maybe a little exaggerated picture it may be, and sometimes there will be some overgrowth of this kind. Okay, I mean, see, people have lots of sufferings, and people are able to manage. People have to learn to manage with the suffering. And yes, there are people who otherwise live normal life even if they are pituitary giants or pituitary dwarf. Is treatment possible? Well, treatment will be possible. The pituitary giantism or the dwarfism develops during the growing period. And during growing period, if the pituitary becomes large, sometimes there are pituitary tumors and extra things will be produced. Are operations possible? It all case to case different. A pituitary giant under examination may undergo an operation and that may be corrected and not. I mean, I am not a correct authority to talk about all these things, but in medical field has gone ahead and there are possibilities that things are controlled, pituitary giantism or pituitary dwarfism or those things. But it's not always so. There are cases where the person has grown. I mean, the person is already grown, but still there is a tendency to produce more growth hormone. Looking at me, do you think I have less growth hormone or more growth hormone? I think I have normal, and most of you probably have normal growth hormone. But there have been cases in the world where this thing can happen. Look carefully to these 4 pictures in this particular sequence. These are age-wise arranged. Younger age, maybe youthful, young age. This is infancy, then young age. Then this is mid-age, and this is old age. These are the 4 photographs of the same person. And it seems that from this picture you can guess some extra growth of the facial bones have begun. Here the extra growth is very clearly seen. So this is what is called as acromegaly. If you don't want to remember the word, quite okay. But you can say that growth hormone hypersecretion can take place in an earlier condition that leads to pituitary giantism, or it can also happen to mid-age or the older age where the bones grow extra, but height will not grow. Then the bones of the hands will grow extra, bones of the face will grow extra, and it will all become abnormal and some other metabolic issues will be there. So this is acromegaly. So these are some of the things of the about the pituitary gland. So we will have a pause and then we will go for thyroid gland. We have got some information about the pituitary. I think it's more than enough for us. We will go for some information about thyroid and then the adrenal. Where is thyroid located? Here, 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 where? There's lots of confusion. I think it's located here. Because, there is what is called a larynx. What is larynx, remember? It's voice box. It is at the start of the trachea. There, just below the larynx, there is a thyroid gland which has got 2 lobes. There may be a 3rd lobe also, additional, but mainly 2 lobes. Thyroid is a large gland. If pituitary is weighing 1 and 1.5 gram, thyroid will be weighing 25 to 30 grams. Oh my God, thyroid is bigger than pituitary. But who is master? Thyroid is not master. Pituitary is master. So small size does not matter. It is the ability that matters. Because the thyroid gland is able to produce a hormone known as TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone will be carried by blood and it will be coming to the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland will then produce the thyroxine. Let's have some understanding of the thyroid gland very briefly. So we will look at the anatomy of the thyroid gland and little bit of histology of the thyroid gland if possible. Here you can see here clearly this is the anatomy. You can see I told you the 3rd lobe looks smaller. These are the 2 lobes. This is trachea. At the start of trachea there is a thyroid gland. There is a beautiful blood supply again. You can see, that every organ is supplied with the arterial blood and the deoxygenated blood is carried by vein. So you can see here very clearly the oxygenated blood is supplied by artery and the deoxygenated blood is collected by the veins. Very beautiful. Thyroid gland is anatomy. Very important gland from metabolism point of view. And if you observe under microscope, it will have such units, spherical units, millions of units are there, microscopic. They are being called as thyroid follicles. Spherical units, oval units they are. These are the cells which produce, the hormone thyroxine. Probably you have heard that thyroxine exists in, thyroxine as a generalized term has two possibilities. Sometimes you might have heard T3 and T4. Have you heard? Don't worry, you'll learn it later on. So the two forms of the thyroid hormones are there, T3 and T4. They are all iodine containing compounds. Okay, now it is possible to exactly mark out the location of the thyroid this way. You can see very clearly here. This is the position of the thyroid. You know, there is a it's possible to have some X-ray opaque material taken, and then you can take a picture, and then the butterfly shape gland is always recorded, as you can see here. The thyroid gland details we are not going to go. Thyroid is an important gland. It controls all the metabolism. Thyroxine will control carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism, and protein metabolism also. It's a metabolic hormone. Thyroid gland is also required for growth. Growth hormone is required for growth. Everybody knows. Similarly, thyroxine is also required for growth. The two together must be there. There is a lot of seriousness about thyroid gland. If during pregnancy, mother doesn't have enough thyroxine, then the growing baby will suffer, will not be developed properly. Or if the baby which is growing, it doesn't have properly developed thyroid gland, then it can suffer even after birth. And that leads to what is called as, you know the word, there are some children born with thyroid deficiency. That term is called as cretinism. I think if picture is available, I'll show. Otherwise, in the PPT, we will cover it. So, thyroid gland is very, very necessary. Oh, one more interesting thing I want to say. You know, frogs metamorphosis. You know this very well now. It seems frog is an interesting living thing for biological studies. It has got so many differences with respect to others. When you want the tadpole to be converted into frog, what you will call this? Tadpole is a larva which is converted into frog. This is called as metamorphosis. And metamorphosis can take place only if thyroxine is available. So the larva must have thyroid gland, and the tadpole larva of the frog will produce the thyroxine, and then only metamorphosis will take place. Many experiments have been done. If suppose you remove the thyroid gland of the larva, operations are possible. You know, thyroid gland of the larva can be removed and stitch back the skin and let it go into water. It will survive, but it will never metamorphose. Or such a larva from whom the thyroid is removed, tadpole larva from whom the thyroid is removed, put back in water and add some thyroxine to the water. Interestingly, the thyroxine is artificially, synthetically available. Put some thyroxine in the water, and through the skin the thyroxine will be absorbed, and the larva will metamorphose. See, there is no thyroid gland in the larva, because you have removed it artificially by dissection. But such a larva from whom thyroid gland is removed, if you put in water and add thyroxine to the water, the metamorphosis takes place. Wonderful. So lots of things, you know, that's how science works. हे बघा, हे सगळं आपल्याला एवढं नॉलेज जे माहीत झाले ना, ते काही इतक्या सहजपणे माहीत नाही झालेलं. इतर ॲनिमल्सवर एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन केले गेले म्हणून आपल्याला ह्युमन बॉडीचं माहीत झालं आहे. त्यामुळे सगळं मेडिकल सायन्स हे संपूर्ण झुलॉजीवर बेस्ड आहे. झुलॉजी म्हणजे काय? ॲनिमल स्टडीज. हे लक्षात घ्या. ओके, देर आर सम problems. You know, thyroid gland also can have some problems. For example, this is very famous. तुम्हाला हे सगळं ऐकून माहिती आहे. पुस्तकामध्ये चित्र आहेत तुमच्या स्कूल बुक्सच्या. Endemic or simple goiter. You know, in certain parts of the world and in India also, there is more chance that this kind of swelling can occur. This is called as endemic goiter or simple goiter. It is actually iodine deficiency issue. You know, there are certain soils where originally the iodine content is low. If the iodine content is low, then probably the thyroxine cannot be produced, because you are aware that for thyroxine to be produced, you need iodine. It's an iodine containing compound. And if the iodine is not there in the soil, it will not be there in the food, it is not there in the salt also, then in that case people will suffer, and then they will have this kind of a goiter. Goiter, what is the meaning of goiter? It's swelling. This can be corrected. काय करता येईल यांचं goiter कमी करण्यासाठी? पुष्कळ वेळानं आयोडीनचं पाणी प्यायला देतात, आयोडिनेटेड वॉटर असतं ते, आणि ठीक आहे, किंवा आयोडिनेटेड सॉल्ट. म्हणून गव्हर्नमेंट हल्ली काय करते की जे काही सॉल्ट विकायचं त्याच्यात आयोडीन असलं पाहिजे. नॉर्मली देर आर लॉट्स ऑफ हॅलोजेन्स. आता मी शब्द वापरला हॅलोजेन, तुम्हाला येतोय ना? कोणकोणचे हॅलोजेन्स आहेत बघा? आयोडीन, क्लोरीन, फ्लोरीन, हे सगळे हॅलोजेन्स आहेत. समुद्राच्या पाण्यात पुष्कळसे असतात, पण पुष्कळदा काय होतं की जेव्हा ते समुद्रातलं मीठ हे रिफाईन करतात त्याला आयोडीन कंटेंट निघून जातो. म्हणून मग ते सांगतात की आमच्या मिठात आम्ही आयोडीन पुन्हा टाकलेलं, आयोडिनेटेड टाटा सॉल्ट. टाटा असो का कुणाचे असो, आयोडिनेटेड असतात कारण तो रूलच आहे की जिथे आयोडीन टाकलेलं असतं पुरेसे आहे. आपल्याला वेगळं आयोडीन घ्यायची गरज नसते बरं का. इनफ आयोडीन इज देअर थ्रू द सॉल्ट अँड थ्रू द फूड. मुळातच फार थोडं आयोडीन लागतं. The requirement of the iodine to the body is very small, and almost all iodine in the body will be always found in where we expect all the iodine in the body to be found in thyroid gland. But then even if suppose there is a shortage, this can happen, this can be cured. Sometimes it may happen that the gland may start producing extra hormones, extra thyroxine. Then that can lead to, oh my God, this situation, exophthalmic goiter. Here the swelling is not shown. You can imagine there can be some swelling, not very big but limited. Here the gland produces extra hormone. So there are two possibilities. I told you for pituitary also, hypo and hyper. First, the simple goiter which was shown to you is a case of hyposecretion, and this is a case of extra. When extra secretion of the thyroxine is there, the person suffers. There is more blood pressure, there is more beating of the heart, too much of heat production. This is hyperthyroidism. And yeah, treatments are possible, of course. There is one typical symbol that eyes, behind eyes more fat tissue is accumulated and the eyes appear to be pushed out. And that's how this is being called as exophthalmic goiter. It's only a symptom. I mean, but these things are corrected. Nowadays, there is a special science known as, there is a science of endocrine tissue known as endocrinology. What is that called as? Endocrinology. Endocrinology is a branch of biology, branch of science. Animal endocrinology major आहे, आणि मग त्याच्यानंतर ह्युमन एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजी निर्माण झाली. यू कॅन बिकम अ एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट. तुम्ही एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजी हे करिअर करू शकता, तुम्ही 100% करू शकता. If you want to go to doctor type of a career, even then you can become an endocrinologist. सारखं कार्डिओलॉजिस्ट व्हायचं आहे, सारखं न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट व्हायचं आहे, सारखं रेडिओलॉजिस्ट व्हायचं, याची काही गरज नाही ना. तुम्ही एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट होऊ शकता. आपले एक खूप तुमचे सिनियर फ्रेंड्स डॉक्टर तुषार गोडबोले आज नाशिकमध्ये प्रॅक्टिस करत आहेत आणि ते एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट आहेत, आणि ते पेडियाट्रिक्स एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट आहेत. विशेषतः ॲडोलेसंट स्टेजचे ते जास्त मोठ्या प्रमाणात आहेत. अशी सुंदर करिअर होतात. एक तुम्ही लक्षात घ्या, डॉक्टर झालंच पाहिजे असं नाही, आणि डॉक्टर झाल्यानंतर अमुक एकच केलं पाहिजे असं नाही आहे. खूप मोठा स्कोप आहे, आणि हे तुम्ही ठरवायचं, तुमच्या पालकांनी नाही. हे मी परत सांगेन, तुम्ही काय करायचं आहे तुम्हाला ठरवता आलं पाहिजे. पालकांची फक्त मदत घ्या, पण निर्णय तुमचा असला पाहिजे. जवळपास कोणी एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट असतील तर तुम्ही शोधून काढा, त्यांच्याशी बोला, जाऊन बोला. एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजी फाउंडेशनला सुरू झालं, कदाचित 10 वर्षानंतर तुम्ही एंडोक्रिनॉलॉजिस्ट म्हणून काम करत असाल. मजा आहे सगळे. सो दॅट्स ऑल अबाउट दी थायरॉइड. विल गो फॉर ॲड्रिनल. Adrenal, I'll just very quickly say that we have already said that adrenal is on the top of the kidneys. These are kidneys, and here is the adrenal. This is one adrenal, and this is the second adrenal. Again, very nicely supplied with blood. If a section of the adrenal is taken, transverse section, then you will get two zones. But why it is called as adrenal? Ad means above. Renos means kidney. Above the kidney is adrenal. So this is one adrenal, this is second adrenal. They have nothing to do with kidney. त्यांच्या किडनीचा युरिन फॉर्मेशनचा काही संबंध नाही. बाय चान्स दे आर देयर. पिट्युटरीला छान जागा मिळून गेली ॲट द बेस ऑफ द ब्रेन. थायरॉइडला एकदम महत्त्वाची जागा मिळाली. ॲड्रिनल वॉज ट्राईंग टू फाइंड अ प्लेस. कुणी जागा द्यायला तयार नव्हतं. ते इंटेस्टाईनला म्हणलं की तुझ्या तिथे येऊ करता म्हणजे ते ऑलरेडी पॅनक्रियाज आहे, आता मला नाही ते जागा तुला द्यायला. असं करता करता मग किडनीला द्यायला येऊन बस माझ्या डोक्यावर. अशी गंमत आहे थोडीशी. सो ॲड्रिनल ग्लँड्स दे आर बाय चान्स ऑन द टॉप ऑफ द किडनी. असं आज तरी आपण म्हणू शकतो. ॲड म्हणजे अबाव, रेनॉस म्हणजे किडनी. सो दे आर द टू ॲड्रिनल ग्लँड्स. त्याचा सेक्शन आपण बघू. त्याच्या खूप डिटेल्समध्ये जायचं काही कारण नाही. But you should have heard that the adrenal gland has two zones. This is the middle zone known as medulla. आणि इथून इतका आहे तो काय? Cortex. पुन्हा कॉर्टेक्सचे तीन zones आहेत बघा. So cortex with three subzones and medulla here. Cortex of the adrenal gland produces cortical hormones. They are popularly called as corticosteroids, cortisone, cortisol, aldosterone. असं बरंच काय काय. At least 40-50 different hormones are there. I'll repeat the hormones of the cortex: cortisone, cortisol, aldosterone. These hormones are very important. Just like thyroxine regulates metabolism, even the cortical hormones also regulate metabolism. And all these hormones are steroids. That's a very important point. And these hormones help in our body to have good immune power, defense power, and they also help to reduce the unwanted excited response of the tissues. That's called as allergy. So many times doctors give some steroid hormones, kind of compounds, to lower down the allergy effect. But naturally it's already here, and these are all producing the steroid hormones, and they are helping our body. Details may not be required. Aldosterone is one such hormone which will also act on kidney. You already know that ADH works on kidney. Similarly, there is a hormone known as aldosterone which is produced from the cortex, and that will regulate the sodium metabolism of the body and so on. Medulla is very different. Medulla will produce adrenaline. One more hormone, noradrenaline. Okay, chemically they are related. थोड़ा फरक है. सध्या adrenaline लक्षात ठेवलं तरी चालेल. Two compounds, adrenaline, noradrenaline. त्याची पर्यायी नाव आहेत एपिनेफ्रिन, नॉरएपिनेफ्रिन. काही गरज नाही एवढे लक्षात द्यायची. चारपैकी एकच नाव लक्षात ठेवा, adrenaline. Adrenaline is being produced here. And the pituitary has a governing hormone. आठवा कुठला आहे ते? ACTH. काय लॉन्ग फॉर्म आहे? Adrenocorticotropic hormone. So ACTH will act only on cortex. So ACTH is a message sent by pituitary. It will act only on cortex. It will not act on medulla. त्याची काही वेगळी कारण आहे. So the pituitary will control the 40-50 hormones of the cortex, but medulla will be controlled directly by brain. खूप डिटेल्स होतील. That's about the pituitary gland, and we have a pause. असं आहे एकंदरीत. आपण थोडंसं pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, we talked about our pure endocrine glands. About the mixed endocrine glands, I think a general information is with you, and that is more than enough. We can now think of the way the hormones function. This is the role of hormones. I think this is rather a compressed picture. Maybe that it can be zoomed later on, and you can see it better later on. What are those things in the body of an animal, body of a human, which are controlled by hormones? Well, growth is being controlled, and the factors, the hormone factors that control growth, GH and thyroxine. Every hormone, every other hormone like testosterone, it is also responsible for growth. For example, it is under the influence of testosterone that adolescent changes can occur. In the PDF form, you will be getting a note about adolescence, because adolescence is that period which is very heavily governed by hormones. I am not going to say much about adolescence, but you are generally aware that it is the time when somewhere between 12 to 18, sometimes some people say it is 10 to 18 years, that is adolescence, and during that time hormones play a major role for the transformation. Those things I think you can read from the sheet. But then testosterone, I was mentioning about that. So in boys, for example, testosterone adds more element to the growth, because the boys grow taller and more muscular, and their shoulders become broader and so on. I mean to say, growth is an effect of many hormones, but two major hormones you can always consider as growth hormone of the pituitary and thyroxine of the thyroid. Then think of the osmoregulation. When we consider excretion, we also considered a bit of osmoregulation. It reminds us of regulation of the amount of water and amount of electrolytes, mineral salts in the body. So it's important, these are two things which will go hand in hand. If you want to regulate the amount of water, it will have to be along with the regulation of the minerals. What minerals? Cations and anions, sodium and potassium and magnesium and calcium, and anions like sulfates and phosphates and bicarbonates and so on. Well, ADH we have already considered. It's something which is produced from hypothalamus, but released from the pituitary, and it does the function of osmoregulation, mainly water regulation, and along with that the salt regulation indirectly. This will work along with aldosterone. ADH is coming from the hypothalamus to pituitary and pituitary to kidneys, and aldosterone is coming from the adrenal cortex to the kidneys. So both these hormones will be working on kidneys, because kidneys are mainly osmoregulatory, osmoregulatory organs. Metabolism. I think this is a word that we have learned when we learned nutrition chapter. It's all the various chemical reactions, and it can be anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is constructive phase, constructive reactions, synthesis of the materials, smaller molecules become larger molecules. This is anabolism. Catabolism means breakdown of things. Hundreds and thousands of chemical reactions are taking place in our cells, and they are controlled by various hormones. So this is called as metabolism, which is being controlled by insulin, glucagon, because carbohydrate metabolism will be regulated by them. Cortisone, cortisol, because protein, lipid metabolisms will be regulated by them. And even the thyroxine, because thyroxine also has got influence on protein, carbohydrate and lipid transformations. So thyroid hormone, pancreas, so insulin, glucagon from there, and aldosterone and cortisone, particularly cortisone, they are coming from this hormone, and this group of hormones is coming from the adrenal cortex. Yeah, there is a parathyroid also. I think in the slideshow we will see the parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands produce parathormone. These two hormones work together. Maybe that you already know. Calcitonin from thyroid and parathormone from parathyroid. Parathyroid are actually 4 small patches on the back side of the thyroid. And these two together control metabolism of calcium. So calcium metabolism, and calcium metabolism is very significant because it is the calcium that makes possible bones, the strength of the bones, and for growth again you require bone growth, and bone growth will require calcium, and calcium will be absorbed only through vitamin in the presence of vitamin D. There is a long complex issues. The working is very complex. So calcitonin and parathormone, they control metabolism of the calcium. So these are some of the hormones that are controlling metabolism. Growth hormone also has a role to play in the metabolism. See, growth hormone, you can say it is controlling growth, but growth is a result of metabolism. You know, metabolism means anabolism. You know, at 10 years you are small, at 15, 16 years you are grown up. More muscles have been added, more connective tissue, more bones. All that is because of addition. And therefore the growth hormone, it is able to generate growth because the growth hormone has effect on metabolism. So I can make a statement like this. The growth hormone will work on all cells. Growth hormone will work on the muscle cells, bone cells, connective tissue cells. Every cell of the body will be controlled by the growth hormone, and under the influence of the growth hormone, cells will multiply, there will be addition, and that's how growth can occur. त्यामुळे तुम्ही असं कन्फ्युजन होऊ नका की ग्रोथ हार्मोनमुळे ग्रोथ होतो का ग्रोथ हार्मोनमुळे मेटाबॉलिझम होतं. तर ग्रोथ हार्मोनमुळे मेटाबॉलिझम कंट्रोल होईल, and because the growth hormone will regulate metabolism, metabolism will be additive process, the anabolism, and that will result into growth. काहींना असे बारीक बारीक गोष्टी लक्षात ठेवायला त्रास होतो असं नाही, पण त्याच्या अभ्यासाच्या पद्धतीमुळे ते पाठ करतात. तुम्ही जर पाठांतर करून जर सायन्स शिकला असाल, आता याच्यापुढे त्रास होणार आहे. का बरं? बिकॉज सायन्स इज ऑल अबाउट बीइंग एबल टू पुट थिंग्स टुगेदर अँड अनालाइज देम. हे बघा, आपण प्लेइंग कार्ड शिकतो की नाही, प्लेइंग कार्डला आपण कसं दरवेळा पत्ते ते पिसतो, ओके, आणि मग त्याचे कॉम्बिनेशन्स तयार होतात, ओके, तसं पाहिजे. So you must have all the facts are okay, but facts you should be able to put in different combinations. So that's very important, and that requires a habit of analysis and synthesis. Imagine, power to imagine, power to think, power to analyze, power to synthesize makes good science, makes good approach to science. So please don't feel confused and bad about it. Don't mug up things. Remember, no doubt, memory is okay, but try to establish relationship between the different things. So growth hormone, because it regulates metabolism, it results into growth. FSH, LH, LTH, they will be working on reproduction. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they will all be working on reproduction. But you know, these are the hormones which are regulating reproduction. Which are those hormones which regulate reproduction? FSH, LH, LTH, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. They regulate the process of reproduction. So reproduction, metabolism, osmoregulation, growth, these are all controlled by several hormones. So this is a simplified drawing to help us to understand that body processes. These are the body processes which are controlled by hormones. Activity, that is separately shown here. I am not talking of, because this arrow is towards brain, don't feel that I am talking of the activity of the brain. This is a generalized diagram. So entire body activity is covered by adrenaline. Because without adrenaline, you will not have the required muscle action. Okay? And so adrenaline, and there is an opposite hormone, acetylcholine. Have you heard of that? Well, but more about that we can talk when we are going to say something about nervous system. So yes, adrenaline is an important hormone that keeps us active, and when you are exercising, a lot of adrenaline is produced. That's necessary. Then only strong muscle actions are possible. So muscle activity is regulated by the adrenaline additionally, and that is a generalized picture, and there are so many details which we will be learning from time to time. I will now move to a few points that are left. Here we have a title, local hormones. You know, what we have learnt already are about the hormones of the pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal, and the testes and ovary, and so on. Beyond that, there are some local hormones. I just mention them. I'll just read them. Gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, and many more. What are these? These are hormones, small quantities. Hormones are always in small quantities. Then why they are called as local hormones? Simply because they are produced and used there near about. They are not produced by any specific endocrine gland. They are produced from some tissues near about. For example, gastrin, you can expect. Gastrin is a hormone produced by the stomach, and then it is working on the gastric glands. Secretin, cholecystokinin, these are the hormones produced by duodenum, and then these will be working on pancreas and gallbladder. I think that will be too much for you immediately, but some of you, if you have already aware, good. If not, know the ants these days. Summer is on and expected is the rainy season now. And ants, for the last 1 month, I can see here and there ants are making a trail. The trail of ants is there. One ant and second ant and third and fourth and 10th and hundreds of ants are going in a way, going one after another, and there is a particular way they turn. And how do they know where to go? You are aware that they give messages to each other. Temporarily they may also stop a bit, and they provide message to. So if this is the second ant, it will pass on the message to third. The third ant will pass a message to the fourth. In fact, they also secrete a trail of ectohormones, and the ectohormones will help them to communicate. One more fantastic example of the pheromones is in the bees. You know that there is a queen bee, and you already know that all the worker bees will come to their own hive. It will not go to the other hive. Why? Because suppose on a tree there are 100 hives, natural hives. Each hive will have a queen, and the queen will produce a specific hormone, and the workers can understand that hormone. So all the bees will be going here and there during the day, and they will be coming back from the flowers to bring back the nectar. But no bee will ever miss its own hive. They will always come to its own hive. Hundreds of hives, but no bee will be going to somebody else's hive. Why? Because the queen bee secretes a particular type of chemical known as ectohormone, and if there are 100 hives and 100 queens, there will be 100 slightly different chemicals. And very superior ability of the bees is to understand which is the chemical of its own hive, its own queen. Unbelievable. That's what I'm saying. Learning of biology is fantastic. It has beginning and there is no end. It is all continuous search and search and search. Even in other animals, elephants, cattle, dogs and cats, tigers, they also have ectohormones. One very funny thing. Many of these wild animals, they want to rub their bodies onto the trees. Why? Because they want to put a signal, a chemical signal there on the trees. That is a kind of a hint to other animals that this is their area. More interestingly, the fecal matter. Many of the wild animals, including the tigers, they have their fecal matter here and there. Why? There is some ectohormone in that also, and other animals will understand that it is somebody else's territory. This is called as territory marking. More funny example is that of our usual dogs, the stray dogs, or even the pet dogs. They will urinate here and there, small quantity. Why? Why they don't urinate at one place? Because they want to mark out that this is their area. Actual thing, this is biologically proved. Fantastic. Ectohormones are for that purpose. For reproduction, breeding also ectohormones work. When a female is on heat, what do you mean by heat? Female is ready for accepting the male for copulation. That time, special pheromones are produced by the female deer and female cows. In wild environment, they are more important. And the males will be attracted to the females because of the pheromone. Imagine, tigers are not very close by to each other. But suppose there is a female tiger on heat. The male tigers, which may be 20 kilometers away, can also understand where is the female because of the chemical. And that's how reproduction in many of these animals, finding the males, the females produce pheromones. Fantastic. This is all behavior science. You can be a behavior scientist. You can become a kind of
behavior science is known as ethology. You can become an ethologist. I think wonderful careers are available in biology. So pheromones are very interesting. Ectohormones, that's for communication in animals. Today we did not consider much details about the other animals, because for other systems we have considered how is the respiratory system in the animals and how is the circulatory system. But today we have not considered because it becomes too much, and it is not so well known to you from school days also. But I think probably you have heard about the insects. There is a rather complicated endocrine tissue organization in the insects. Certain things are attached, certain glands are attached to the brain of the insects, and certain glands are there in the thorax of the insects. Two hormones are very famous: juvenile hormone and ecdysone. Very famous hormones. Juvenile hormone, which is produced by the insects, helps development of the larva. Juvenile word itself points out. So juvenile hormone helps in the development of the larva, and ecdysone, it is necessary for molting. So you know what is molting? Molting is growing. Insects, they give out their outer cover and they grow. After some days they again give out their outer skin and then they become large. That's called as molting. So ecdysone is for ecdysis. What is ecdysis? Molting. So two hormones are very famous: juvenile hormone for the larval development and ecdysone for molting. But we will not go into those details. Overall, therefore, we have considered local hormones, pheromones, and insects, their hormones. Basically, one question remains to be considered. What is the chemical nature of hormones? Basically, you know that hormones are required in small quantities. And what is the chemical nature? Well, all these small organic molecules may be proteins or amino acids or glycoprotein. What do you mean by glycoprotein? We are going to have one session on molecules. Carbohydrate and protein together is a glycoprotein. And then some of the hormones are steroid. Can you remember which are the steroid hormones? Cortical hormones. Cortisone, cortisol, aldosterone, they are steroids. Of course, when I say protein, it's not always big protein, small, polypeptide you can say. So there are polypeptides or single amino acid. I think I'll provide you an example here. You know thyroxine? Thyroxine has just 2 amino acids. And it's a small molecule and so on. So these are different compounds. They are all organic compounds produced in small quantity. One very interesting thing, they are required in small quantity. They travel through the blood, they go to the cells and work there, and that's all. They get lost. The hormone molecule ekda वापरला की परत नाही वापरता है. So body has to continuously produce the hormones. One question should come to your mind: how do the cells know? How do the cells know which hormone they want? And how a particular hormone will go and meet that particular cell only? There are lots of questions. Our foundation course may not be the right time to answer all your questions. But at this point, hormones at synapse. Are you aware of this word synapse? Synapse is a gap between 2 neurons. I'll just put it here. This is 1 neuron, this is 2nd neuron, and this is 3rd neuron. Here there is synapse. You are aware that electrical signals are passed through the neurons. This is very important. What I am trying to say is very important. Neurons can carry only electrical signals, but 2 neurons are never actually connected. There are trillions of neurons in the body, but no 2 neurons are connected. There is always a gap, and this particular gap which is existing here is what is called as, this gap is called as, G stands for gap. What is that called as? Synapse. And there chemical is produced. So then when I am putting up a chalk and putting it back, message has come from my brain to hand, and that's how the impulse has traveled. Message from the neurons is E. E stands for electrical. Then at the gap it is chemical, again electrical, again chemical, again electrical. My God. Is it that way the body works? Yes, fantastic. This is also a good example of how the two things regulate together. एक मी तुम्हाला सांगितलं होतं ब्रेन त्याच्यामध्ये हायपोथॅलॅमस आणि त्याच्याखाली पिट्युटरी. So just like that is one example to show the correlation between the nervous and the hormonal control. This is also one good example. Nervous system cannot work without hormones because at the gaps there are hormones which work. Special hormones. There are many hormones. Some of these hormones are adrenaline, serotonin, acetylcholine, and many others. These are all called as synaptic hormones. जरा हेवी जाईल तुम्हाला. तुम्हाला अचानक हे नर्वस सिस्टीम मध्ये हार्मोन्स कुठून आले? मी तेच तर तुम्हाला सांगतोय की नर्वस सिस्टीमचं फंक्शनिंग हार्मोन शिवाय होऊ शकत नाही. व्हाय? बिकॉज दोज हार्मोन्स हॅव टू बी प्रेझेंट ॲट द गॅप्स. व्हॉट इज दॅट गॅप नोन ॲज सायनॅप्स. मग तुम्ही म्हणाल की हे एंडोक्राइन ग्लँडचे हार्मोन आहेत का? नो 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 नो. एव्हरी न्यूरॉन, सपोज दिस इज अ न्यूरॉन. This neuron at the end has the ability to produce hormone. Every neuron can produce hormone. There are trillions of neurons and every neuron at the end, तुम्हाला माहिती ना axon, end of the axon can produce hormones. Oh my God, what a complex body I am possessing. Every animal has a very complex body and the complex body has to be regulated, and for regulation you are nervous as well as endocrine system. हे जरा थोडं हेवी होत असेल, हळूहळू कळेल तुम्हाला. So hormones at the synapse, adrenaline, serotonin, acetylcholine, these are all chemicals which are present. So this is how some of these points I have tried to communicate with you, and with the pause then I'll go for the remaining thing. काय मंडळी, थकलात का? थकून कसं चालेल? आता तर खरी मजा पुढे आहे सायन्स शिकताना. ओके, डिटेल्स आर देअर, सो मेनी डिटेल्स आर देअर, अँड you will get used to these details. थोड़ी जास्त मेहनत है बरं का. Taking science is good, but at the same time it's extremely a responsible decision. If you're likely to take science, please be very much responsible. You have to regularize yourself, regulate yourself, and you have to be independent and disciplined. मग होऊ शकतं. ओके, थोडा आळस, थोडा कंटाळा, बसण्याचा कंटाळा, कॉन्सन्ट्रेशन होत नाही, असं काही चालत नाही. मेक शुअर दॅट यू आर पुटिंग अप युअर बेस्ट. सातत्याने तास अभ्यास करणं ते पण योग्य नाही. डेफिनेटली यू शुड हॅव अ गॅप्स, पण एखादी गोष्ट चालू असताना मध्येच उठणं, मग परत बसणं, मग मध्येच दुसरं काहीतरी करणं, असं करू नका. ओके ओके. मग आता आपण थोडीशी काही पुढची गोष्ट बोलू. मी मगाशी असा प्रश्न विचारला, हाऊ डू द सेल्स नो, हाऊ डू द टिश्यूज नो दॅट दे नीड द हार्मोन? And if a hormone comes to them, how do they know that it is their messenger? And how the glands know that the hormones are required by the different tissues? These are not easy questions to answer. Endocrinology अजूनही सगळ्या जगभर खूपसा अभ्यास चालू आहे आणि काही काही आन्सर्स माहीत झाले. आपण एका चित्राच्या द्वारे हे आपण बघूया. So we'll have one picture in which I can say some of these things, how these things work. Let's have some questions raised and some questions answered. My first question is, how do the cells know that a particular message has come for them? I'll repeat my statement. How do the different cells know that a particular message is for them? What do I mean? Blood takes all the hormones to each organ. Say for example testes, whatever blood is in the testes, the blood will have all hormones. It will have aldosterone and cortisol and thyroxine and insulin and glucagon and FSH and this and that. How will the testis cells will know what hormones they need? A cell of a testis, for example here, this is the testis and there is a blood supply to the testis. It will definitely require FSH. But testes also require insulin. Why? Because without insulin and without glucagon, testes cannot perform their carbohydrate metabolism. Will it require thyroxine? Yes. But more specifically, it will require FSH. The pituitary will produce FSH that will come into the blood capillary, and through the blood it will be going into the testes, and the FSH will be taken into the testes. Similarly, the insulin and glucagon will come from pancreas, because all the hormones are present at a time in the blood, and they will also be taken into the testes and so on. But we will neglect other hormones. We will specifically talk of the FSH. You know that FSH is required for the testes to be able to produce sperms. So that has been shown here. So you can say testes is a target organ of FSH. What do you mean by target organ? Target organ is that tissue, that organ which is to be regulated by the hormone. So my question is, which is the target organ of FSH? In the case of males, it is testes. In the case of females, it is ovary. That's a target organ. Which is the target organ of ADH? आता तुम्ही आन्सर दिला पाहिजे. Antidiuretic hormone of the posterior pituitary, and the target organ is kidney. Which is the target organ of growth hormone GH? आता इथे जरा तुम्हाला प्रश्न येईल, कारण ग्रोथ हार्मोन सगळीकडेच लागतं. सो इट इज नॉट वन growth hormone and thyroxine, they cannot work only on one organ. They will work on the entire body. Insulin, glucagon, they will also work on the entire body, every cell. Thyroxine, growth hormone, will working on all cells. So some hormones will work on all cells, and some hormones will work on specific cells. So here for FSH, testes is the target organ. Now let us look at this picture. This is magnified. Suppose I magnify a part of this. This is one of the cells of the testes. This is a target cell. This is a target organ. In the target organ testes, there will be cells. So hormone will reach up to the cell. And now there is very interesting thing. Please try to listen and record with concentration. On the surface of the cell, there are what are called as receptors. I'll write that word, receptors. Okay. So on the surface, there are what are called as receptors. What are receptors? Receptors are special protein molecules. This is a cell membrane, and there are special protein molecules which will act as receptors. These symbols I have shown. These are receptors for FSH. See, FSH has been brought to the testes. FSH molecule is coming out of the capillary. This blue dot is FSH molecule. It will join with the receptor, and that's a chemical reaction which is taking place here. And then that chemical reaction will lead to another chemical reaction. So these are all chemical signaling. Once again, FSH molecule will leave the capillary. It will join the receptor. This is FSH receptor, and then it will bring about some other chemical reactions inside. All this is chemical signaling. And what is the message? The message of the FSH is to produce sperms. When I say here that testes produce sperms, and testes have millions of cells, so different cells of the testes will get the signal, and then each cell will get stimulated. It will respond to the message. And what is the response? Production of sperms. This is a process which is called as spermatogenesis. Have you heard of this word? Not heard? Doesn't matter. Genesis is production. I try to repeat that word. Some of you are writing in the notebook, I know. Spermatogenesis, sperm production by the testes under the influence of FSH. खूप डिटेल्स मध्ये तुम्हाला शिकायचं आहे. अजून तर नुसती सुरुवात आहे. मजा येणार आहे फार. So this is a target cell. This is a target organ, and inside there are target cells. Receptors are there. But one thing, this particular cell will also require thyroxine. So there will be special thyroxine receptors. ते मी आता फक्त इथे symbolically काढतोय. Suppose these are the thyroxine receptors. असे thyroxine receptors आहेत समजा. आणि त्या सेलला पुन्हा इन्सुलिन लागेल, मग त्याला मी इन्सुलिन रिसेप्टर पण काढू शकतो. So I can show here insulin receptors. काय सिंबल वापरू मी हा असा वापरतो insulin receptors. म्हणजे प्रत्येक हॉर्मोनसाठी वेगवेगळे रिसेप्टर्स असतात. व्हॉट आर रिसेप्टर्स? Receptors are protein molecules on the surface of the cells which receive the hormones. तिथे सिग्नलिंग होतं. जरा जास्तच होतंय का? हे तर तुम्हाला लागेलच. या माहितीच्या आधारे तुम्हाला तसे आत्ताही नीटचे काही प्रश्न यायला लागतील सोडा त्यांना. नीट ठीक आहे, एकमेव परीक्षा नाही, खूप निर्णय प्रकारच्या परीक्षा असतात. बायोटेक्नॉलॉजीच्या वेगळ्या एंट्रन्सेस आहेत. नीट ही फक्त मेडिकलसाठी आहे. बाकी तुमच्या चांगल्या कोर्सेसला जायचे असतील तर इवन प्युअर सायन्ससाठी एंट्रन्सेस आहेत. त्या सारख्या परीक्षांचा विचार करणं काही बेसिक माहिती आहे तुम्हाला असली पाहिजे. सो अ सेल ऑफ अ टेस्टिस विल हॅव लॉट ऑफ रिसेप्टर्स फॉर डिफरंट हॉर्मोन्स. एव्हरी हॉर्मोन विल हॅव अ सेपरेट रिसेप्टर. तुम्हाला आता मी असा प्रश्न विचारतो, विल देअर बी FSH रिसेप्टर ऑन द लिव्हर सेल्स? आता नीट विचार करा. माय क्वेश्चन इज, आर यू एक्सपेक्टिंग FSH receptors on the cells of the liver? Of course not, because FSH चा अर्थच लिव्हर सेल्सला कळणार नाही. ओनली टेस्टिस सेल्स और द ओव्हरी सेल्स कॅन अंडरस्टँड व्हॉट इज दिस मेसेज. कारण मेसेज कळायला पाहिजे ना. ती जी लँग्वेज आहे ती त्यांना डिकोड करता आली पाहिजे. ही एक कोडेड लँग्वेज आहे हॉर्मोनची, ती त्यांना डिकोड करता आली पाहिजे. त्यासाठी त्यांना रिसेप्टर्स असतात. सो liver cells don't have receptor for FSH. Liver cells will have receptors for thyroxine, कारण तिथे कार्बोहायड्रेट मेटाबॉलिझम चालणार आहे. बट लिव्हर सेल्स डोंट हॅव रिसेप्टर्स फॉर FSH. असं सगळं काय काय असतं. अजून हे सगळ्याचा अभ्यास व्हायचाच आहे. खूप रिसर्चमध्ये खूप स्कोप आहे. सगळ्यांनी मेडिकलला जायला पाहिजे असं नाही, आणि मेडिकलला गेलं तर रिसर्चमध्ये गेलं पाहिजे मेडिकलच्या, आणि नाही तर बाकीच्यांनी बाकीच्या रिसर्चमध्ये जा. खूप जणांना असं वाटतं आपण रिसर्चमध्ये जाऊ. ते जरा अवघडच आहे, पण जाता येतं, करता येतं. इंटरेस्ट डेव्हलप करा. बेसिक बायोलॉजी छान पाहिजे, बेसिक केमिस्ट्री आणि काही बेसिक फिजिक्स आलं पाहिजे, मग हा रिसर्च जमेल. सो दॅर इज अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग अबाउट रिसेप्टर्स. ते स्टेटमेंट काय लिहिलं बघा. दिस इज हाऊ हॉर्मोन्स वर्क. हाऊ डू द ग्लँड्स ऑर द हॉर्मोन मॉलिक्युल्स ऑर द टार्गेट सेल्स नो. म्हणजे काय, यांना कसं कळतं, पिट्रीला कसं कळतं की हे तिकडे द्यायचं आहे. How does pituitary know that it is required by testes? How does the testes know that what is their requirement? I think body is quite complex. Only one thing I'll mention here with this respect. There are reverse messages also. In what sense? Suppose the FSH quantity is low in the blood. If the FSH quantity is low in the blood, that is a signal to the hypothalamus. Who produces FSH? Pituitary. And if the shortage of FSH is there in the blood, the same blood is going to brain, hypothalamus. And the brain, that is hypothalamus, will understand, chemically understand that there is less of FSH in the blood. Then it will send a strong signal to the pituitary. काय चाललंय? FSH पाहिजे, पटकन तयार करा. Then the pituitary will produce more FSH because pituitary is under the control of hypothalamus. If suppose the FSH quantity becomes high, pituitary खूप FSH तयार केलं, same blood with lot of FSH will go to the hypothalamus. मग hypothalamus पुन्हा रागवणार पिट्युटरीला, हे काय इतका FSH कशाला पाहिजे, कमी करा. And pituitary will reduce the FSH. Fantastic. याला निगेटिव्ह रेग्युलेशन म्हणायचं. Okay? Oh my God, what a fantastic topic this is, and what a fantastic subject biology is, because it is to understand the life around, and life is so precious. Ours is the only planet which is known to have life. So enjoy life, enjoy these topics of this kind. समजा तुम्हाला हे 2 तासाचं रेकॉर्डिंग एकदम ऐकायचं नसेल तर तुम्हाला फॅसिलिटी आहे, थोडंसं ऐका, थोडं नंतर ऐका, आणि आज नसेल ऐकायचं तर उद्यापर्यंत तुम्ही पोस्टपोन करू शकता. फार पोस्टपोन करू नका, पण ही फॅसिलिटी रेकॉर्डेड अशा प्रकारच्या प्लॅटफॉर्मचीच आहे. त्यामुळे आम्ही मला वाटतं की हेच करणार आहोत. आणि तुम्हाला आता सगळ्यांना कळलेलं आहे, आणि त्याचे फोन पालकांचे आम्हाला येतात, आणि आम्ही पालकांना तुम्हाला फोन करतोय की वर्षभर आपल्याला 11वी सगळं ऑनलाईन घ्यायचं आहे, खूप मजा येणार आहे. आणि ते मार्च एप्रिलपर्यंत जरी आपलं ते 11वी संपतं, तर 11वी म्हणजे काय असतं, नाही काही 11वी काही 12वी. 11वी काय वेगळं असं नाही आहे, त्यातलं बराचसं पोर्शन तर 12वीचं पण आहे, थोडा म्हटलं तर. सो डोंट वरी अबाउट इट. एक छोटीशी गोष्ट. I am just trying to put a kind of a teaser for you. Two brain teasers. This is one thing we have to explain. Here is a brain and here is a muscle, and the message is going from brain to muscle, and these are all neurons, and there is E and CH, E and CH, E and CH. याचा स्क्रीनशॉट तुम्ही घेऊन बघा. हे कदाचित मी तुम्हाला तुमच्या वर्कशीटमध्ये रिपीट पण करेन. हे एक्सप्लेन करू शकलं पाहिजे व्हॉट इज हॅपनिंग. मगाशी मी एक्सप्लेन केलं होतं बोर्डवर. ओके, दिस इज वन थिंग. These are neurons, this is synapse, and along the neurons E and at the synapse CH, and message starts from brain and muscle contracts. So you have to explain what must be happening. Second teaser is more routinized. 3 columns. You have hormones, enzymes and vitamins, and you are supposed to compare this because these are 3 important biological compounds, and many times these are mentioned and separately understood, but comparisons help. Comparisons are one of the best ways to understand certain things in science. You already know hormones are chemicals. They are small quantities. Enzymes are also chemicals. Are you aware? Enzymes are all proteins. Most of the enzymes are proteins, and so they are also chemicals. And vitamins, they are also chemicals. And all of them are organic molecules. I'm sure by now you have enough knowledge of chemistry to understand what is organic and what is inorganic. So hormones, enzymes, vitamins are organic molecules, and these organic molecules will definitely be required in small quantities, and you are supposed to explain, compare and explain these things. So this is explanation for this one, and this is comparison for this. These two are separate questions. This is one question and this is another question. When you say compare, it is not distinguish between. Distinguish between means only write the differences. Compare चा अर्थ काय? You can write some common points also. What will be the common point? Common points will be hormones, enzymes and vitamins. All are organic molecules. All are required in small quantities, but still differences are there. All of these are working at the level of cells. So I think I'm not going to tell you all the details just now. I will repeat this question again in the worksheet, and then probably, when worksheets are being given, usually after a few days we are providing you the answers also. आम्ही लगेच काय आन्सर देत नाही. त्याचं कारण असं की तुमच्या सगळ्यांचे ते वर्कशीट सोडवून झालेले नसतात. सो वी प्रोव्हाइड यू द वर्कशीट्स, अँड आफ्टर अ फ्यू डेज वी गिव्ह द आन्सर्स. याचं छान कलेक्शन करा. काही काही विद्यार्थी फार सिस्टमॅटिकली काम करतायत. एक लक्षात घ्या, गुड स्टार्ट ज्यांचा होतो ना त्यांना पुढे चांगलं भवितव्य असतं. सो आता हे खूप छान स्टार्ट बायोलॉजी झालं आहे तुमचं. त्याच्यावर प्रत्येक गोष्टीवर काम करा, वर्क करा. सो दिस इज समथिंग विच इज टू बी सॉल्व अगेन इन द वर्कशीट. याचा विचार करून ठेवू शकता तुम्ही. दॅट्स इट. येस, नाव द एंड ऑफ द endocrine session, and we will have some interesting pictures. Some of those are repetitions which you have already seen on the OHP, but I think this PPT will provide you maybe a good summary for all these things. So this is going to be the picture show now for you. Let's begin. I think this is all pretty well known to you. You can see these two pictures, and you can see the thyroid gland and the pituitary. Well, pituitary is also called as hypophysis. You should know pituitary is the same as hypophysis. And this is thyroid, and there is a thymus gland here, and pancreas is located in the duodenal loop, which is not shown here. And these are the adrenal glands, and these are the ovaries, and in the case of the male, the testes. So same things here. Let's go for the next picture. Once again, the same thing. I don't think repeated slides are required. Okay, this is thyroid, this is pituitary, this is the loop of duodenum, there is pancreas, and the spots in the pancreas are pointing out to the islets of Langerhans. It's a mixed gland. The ovaries and the testes. Next. Okay, once again. So this is the anterior pituitary, and this is posterior pituitary. There are some odd names: adenohypophysis and neurohypophysis. If you like, you can remember. Otherwise, don't worry. And this is the sella turcica, the cavity which was shown to you, in which is seated the pituitary, and is a very nice blood supply to the pituitary. Once again, I want to say that this is hypothalamus, and to the hypothalamus, hypophysis is attached. Don't get confused. Hypothalamus is a part of the brain, and hypophysis means pituitary. Moving kidneys, on the top of the kidneys, the adrenal glands. Next, section of the adrenal gland. Any one of these sections. Now this is cortex. 3 regions. 1, 2, 3. 3 regions of the cortex. And this is medulla. Medulla produces adrenaline, noradrenaline. Cortex produces corticosteroids. I think this we can pass on because you know this is anterior and posterior pituitary. Next. This picture was already shown to you. See that these photographs were taken and preserved, and you can see the child growing, and she becomes a young lady and a mid-aged lady and an old lady, and you can see the acromegaly. Next. Oh, we have seen these things earlier also, pituitary giant and pituitary dwarf. Exophthalmic goiter. This is a hyperthyroidism, hypersecretion of the thyroid gland. Simple goiter because of iodine deficiency. More common but more easy to cure. Cretinism, yes. So this is a cretin which when treated she became okay. But it depends. Cretinism can be cured. It depends on what the original, how much of shortage is there. This is a cretin child, and after the cretinism is cured, a cretin child will have, if it depends on what stage it has happened, it can have low brain development and low physical growth and mental growth and so on. I think it seems thankfully this child is recovered. This is thyroid gland. You know this very well. There are people who are surgeons who are, they operate only on thyroid gland. Sometimes thyroid gland, if it has grown more, if it starts producing extra hormones, if required, the thyroid gland operation has to be done. Sometimes thyroid tumors are there. Sometimes thyroid cancers are there. And operations of the thyroid are very difficult because there is so much of blood supply. And only specialist who is in thyroid surgery can do it. This is how there is a radiograph possible. You can take a radiograph of a thyroid gland of this type to know whether the thyroid is a normal position or less developed or more developed, etc. I think this is to be bypassed. Behind the thyroid gland, there are 4 patches known as, yes, say, parathyroid glands. And these produce what hormone? Parathormone. Calcitonin is produced by thyroid. And parathyroid will produce parathormone. And parathormone will try to increase the calcium level of the blood. And calcitonin will try to decrease, just like insulin glucagon. And the two together will regulate the calcium level of the blood. I think the same thing. Continue. Section, this is histology. Histology means when you take a section of the organ, it is histology. You can see the follicles. It's a drawing there. These are thyroid follicles. You can see the cells. And all this dark material is actually thyroxine. Thyroxine with some protein. So protein molecules are there to which thyroxine is attached. It's called as colloid by chance if you know. So that is the histology of the section of the thyroid. This is typically the thyroxine molecule. There is an amino acid. By chance, if you want to know, I can say tyrosine. Doesn't matter, sir. Okay, 2 tyrosine molecules come together, and that becomes thyroxine. I stands for iodine. Iodine. This is a thyroxine molecule. This is a thyroid hormone. It may have 3 iodines or 4 iodines. So, if it is 3 iodines, it is triiodothyronine. If there are 4 iodines, it is T4. This is typically आपण जेव्हा थायरॉक्सिन म्हणतो ना तर T4 असतं. But equally good is T3. Both are there at a time. Both function the same way. Pancreas is symbolic है. काही नाही. ही pancreatic duct है. It is carrying pancreatic juice. So this is exocrine. But here the spots which are shown, they are all endocrine. And these are the spot where you can see the cells. Some are producing, alpha and beta cells. So some are alpha cells and some are beta cells. And this purple color is a beta cell. It produces insulin. And reddish cells are all alpha cells. They produce glucagon. Oh, that's how the picture is being taken. Radioactive iodine is used to detect thyroid anomalies. Okay. And here I think we end the session, and I hope you will like it, and you can always listen to these things and talk about this. अशी पण शक्यता आहे की तुम्ही एकमेकांना हे बोलू शकता, सांगू शकता, एक्सप्लेन करू शकता आणि इंटरेस्ट घेऊ शकता. पण तुमची नोटबुक पाहिजे, तुम्ही ते रेकॉर्ड केलं पाहिजे, and make sure that you are also solving the worksheets. So